7 years dead, traveling all the while. No rest, no peace, incessant torture of remorse. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house, and weary journeys lie before me. Yet another year, and I must journey with this great weight of metal. The chain I forged in life, link by link, and yard by yard I girded it on of my own free will, and now I must wear it in this eternal darkness. Again and again I must walk abroad among my fellow men and travel far and wide. No rest, no peace, I cannot linger anywhere. Because I did not go forth among humanity in life, I am condemned to do so after death, doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me, and witness what I cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and turn to happiness. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger. Burdened by this heavy chain, link by link, I forged it among all the spirits in this dark place. I've seen none with a chain like mine. I never saw any like it except for Scrooge. He was full as heavy and long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago, and he has labored on it since, and it has become a ponderous chain. He will one day join me here, doomed as I am to wander in bitter misery. I had no friends. Scrooge was most like to one, but if he were an enemy, I would not wish this fate upon him. But I have no reprieve, no comfort for him. It comes from other regions and is conveyed by other ministers. His spirit too will be condemned to wander, to never rest. If I could but warn him, if there were only a way, if I might bring some light to his mind and open his heart, if I could keep him from this darkness, I might find some peace, true peace, if there might be a way. Ebenezer, I come tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. A chance and hope.
Before each sermon in this series, we will be having a short soliloquy to kind of introduce us to the character of the season, of the evening, of the day. Happened to them in the evening, it's happening to us in the morning. You know, A Christmas Carol is not your traditional feel-good Christmas story. The story actually begins, Marley was dead. A rather unconventional way to welcome the holiday season, don't you think? I mean, what goes better with Christmas than creepy ghosts, right? By the end of Ebenezer Scrooge's journey, we find Scrooge has found new life. It's an unconventional hero's tale. And so, as odd as it may seem to start Christmas with death, by the end, it makes perfect sense. At the beginning of the story on Christmas Eve, Scrooge is as good as dead. His soul is as frigid and bleak as the midwinter air. There's a lovely song that in the bleak midwinter, that starts out in heartbroken and ends the way Scrooge's life does. he goes on a difficult and frightening journey. And when he wakes up on Christmas morning, he is a changed man. A Christmas Carol is a timeless story, not only because we hear about Scrooge's past and his present and his future, but because generations have told and retold this story in their own way. I used to love to go to Guthrie and see a territorial Christmas Carol set in early statehood. I used to love watching all the different movies, and Patrick Stewart did a one-man show that I enjoyed, and if you know me, you'd know why. But my favorite version of this, people look at me funny, and it's not Scrooge McDuck. It's the movie Scrooged with Bill Murray. But I love the way it's told, and I love the way they bring the ghosts to life. This is a story of redemption. It's going to be with us for a long time. It's a story that has embedded itself into our culture. Everyone knows what it means to be called a Scrooge. And everyone still lets Tiny Tim tug at their heartstrings. This dismissive response, "Bah! Humbug!" perfectly expresses the worldview of Ebenezer Scrooge, this tragic character. He's a sad man, Scrooge is. Christmas is not a happy time for him, but let's face it, there is no happy time for this man. Scrooge has come to mean stinginess and greed and generally being in a terrible mood. His negative image, it's a testament to it that in England, and the last figures I could find was from 2013, there were only 12 children in England named Ebenezer in 2013. But do you know what the word Ebenezer actually means in Hebrew? Stone of help. We've changed the words in most of the hymnals to the song, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." And so most of the time we sing, "Here I raise to thee an altar." But the original words were, "Here I raise mine Ebenezer, hither to thine help I've come." Even though by the end of the story, Ebenezer Scrooge is a changed person, which I think is what Dickens is foreshadowing with the name, actually. The character remains a strong caricature of everything our Christmas celebrations shouldn't be. You know what the modern take of Ebenezer Scrooge is? It was a cartoon that came out in the 60s. The Grinch. Literally was a modern take on this story. It seems we have a problem accepting that Ebenezer Scrooge can be redeemed. But rather, maybe we need to think about the hope that it could happen. Maybe over the course of this worship series over Ebenezer Scrooge's, his name might come to mean something different for us than greed and stinginess. After all, if Scrooge can be redeemed, well then we can. The word Advent actually comes from a Latin word meaning to come. The 4 Sundays before Christmas, the church gathers to wait for the birth of the Christ child. We read stories from the Hebrew Scriptures in which the church has historically seen God's plan to send a Messiah. Let's hear again these words of the prophet Isaiah, and these are from Isaiah 9 and a little bit from Isaiah 11. "A child is born to us. A son is given to us, and authority will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal One, Prince of Peace. There will be vast authority and endless peace for David's throne and for his kingdom, establishing and sustaining it with justice and righteousness now and forevermore." A shoot shall come out of the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of its roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Thanks be to God for the reading of these words. Waiting for something that has already happened. Isn't that kind of funny in a way? Advent plays on our notion of time. The church gathers in the present to ponder the past for a future hope. A Christmas Carol is a beautiful story for Advent because it is a tale in which the past and the present and the future all come together to be transformative for us. Certainly it is a story about Scrooge's love for money and his altruistic failures, but it's a story about how Scrooge cannot let go of the past. Jesus came to save us from counting our past as our only reality. It's like when Moses led God's people out of the Egyptian slavery and on into the wilderness, and because living in the wilderness was not easy, they were caught wandering between where they were and where they were going. 40 years they spent between where they were and where they were going. And people complained and wished they had died as slaves in Egypt. The people became so stubborn and bitter, almost Scrooge-like in their relationship with God and in their relationship with one another. Instead of moving forward in faith, trusting that God was with them, the people kept looking over their shoulder, hopelessly lamenting over the way things were in the past. Advent's like living in the wilderness, between what was and what will be. Living into this tension, remembering God's promises, deepening our faith. These become spiritual disciplines that keep us from becoming Scrooges. Even though the promised land may seem far off, we hold tightly to the promise of our God, for the one who promised is faithful. So in Advent, we spend 4 weeks waiting for Christ coming into the world. It's a strange thing to wait for something to happen that we know has already occurred. Some things you can only do once. For example, watching the OU-OSU football game last night doesn't have the same energy or tension when you know the end of the game. A good mystery novel isn't nearly as good if you know that the butler did it in the ballroom with the candlestick before you start. Advent is different. Christians profess that Christ was born, that he died, and that he rose again. The big reveal has already happened. The church doesn't wait in expectation for what God is going to do. Rather, we live into the tension of where the divine meets our world, knowing that God has already reconciled all things through Christ. But the story isn't over yet. Hymns and other religious songs are meant to communicate theology and tradition and experience of God. And in large part, music is a vehicle through which theology and tradition and story has been learned throughout history. Even somebody who is not really familiar with the Christian tradition can probably finish a lyric or two of a Christmas hymn. Hark the herald angels sing. Or Silent Night. Have a good night. Halligen Nacht. Okay, you're doing it in German. That I'll accept. I thought you said have a good night. Scrooge is not going to. This is one of the reasons why Jesus spent so much time teaching in stories, in parables. The prodigal son reminds us of God's love and forgiveness. The Good Samaritan urges us to offer compassion. And the sheep and the goats cautions us about forgetting the sick and the poor and the hungry and the imprisoned. And although Dickens' carol doesn't have any music, and Dickens' carol is a lot longer than a parable, he uses the power of story to remind us that there is no soul too gruff, no soul too cold, or no soul too cantankerous for God's redeeming power. As Scrooge is sleeping, the servants' bells over the door chaotically chime, waking Scrooge up from his meditative slumber, and his dead partner, Jacob Marley's ghost, appears. Weighed down by heavy chains that have been forged with misery, Marley says that he is restless, always traveling with an incessant torture of remorse. And part of Marley's punishment is the inability to find peace. And his relentlessness is one we know so well through the holidays. There's seemingly countless parties to go to, and decorations and concerts, more gifts to wrap and stockings to hang and meals to prepare. On the other hand, there's loneliness. Memories of loved ones no longer with us. The numbing silence of an empty house, the sadness of giggling children you could never have yourself. Advent is to be a time of waiting, not only to live into the tension of when the divine and creation collide together, but it is the spiritual discipline of slowing down. Slowing down to notice God's presence in a still small voice within the violent and hurried world around us. Be still and know that I am God, the psalmist reminds us. But Jacob Marley is doomed to wander in constant, aimless motion, like a shopper on Christmas Eve trying to find that one present that he hadn't been able to find. And Marley offers Scrooge a warning, echoing the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man ignores Lazarus, the poor dying man who's been sitting at his gate, who would welcome any scraps of food, but the rich man does nothing. And they both die. Lazarus is in heaven and the rich man in hell, and there's this great chasm in between that separates them, and neither can cross one to the other. And the rich man wants Lazarus to bring him water because he's in agony. He insists that Lazarus should go to his brothers and warn them to change their ways so they don't end up in this eternal torment. Even then, the rich man still sees Lazarus as a servant to do his bidding. He doesn't see Lazarus as a valued child of God. The parable offers a conviction to open our eyes to value each and every life. The rich man's torment is his own stubbornness on holding on to his misplaced assumption that his life is more valuable than Lazarus. You know, the great void between Lazarus and the rich man wasn't wealth or status. It was ignorance. When we fail to see that class is a human construct, built around a false belief that some souls are worth more than others, we build a huge chasm. And in a way, Marley, weighed down by the change he forged in life, represents the rich man in Jesus' parable, affirming that you reap what you sow, but warning Scrooge that he has been sowing the wrong kind of seed. And Scrooge responds, "But you were always a good man of business, Jacob." To which Marley answers, "Business? Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity and mercy and forbearance and benevolence were all my business." You see, now Marley can see the plight of the poor, but he can't do anything about it other than reveal it to Scrooge. If Marley's ghost were to come visit one of us, what do you think he would say? But there is hope, because God's kingdom doesn't look like our kingdom. When Mary was pregnant with Jesus, she traveled to see her cousin Elizabeth, and when they met, Mary offered a great vision of what God's kingdom looks like in the world. She said, "With all my heart I glorify the Lord. In the depths of who I am, I rejoice in God, my Savior. God has pulled the powerful down from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. God has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty-handed. God has come to the aid of the servant Israel, remembering God's mercy, just as promised to our ancestors, to Abraham and to Abraham's descendants forever." During Advent, we remember Mary's vision of God's creation coming into the world through Christ. It is a graceful world in which the proud are scattered, the hungry are filled, the lowly are lifted, and the hopeless are offered new life. God's miracle has begun in each of us for the sake of the world. God bless us, everyone. Amen.